So hello, everybody. My name is Carsten Wenzlaff. I'm very happy to see you all. I'm from Ecosome, which is a company based in Berlin, in Germany. And we are part of a large project called CE Responsible, which is funded by Interreg Central Europe. And my colleague Anja is going to talk about this in a few seconds. But I wanted to welcome you all to this fascinating 1 hour session where all of us can have a lively discussion. I will introduce the speakers in a few seconds, but I wanted to mention again that we are recording all of this. So please mute yourself or switch off your camera if you don't want to be recorded. And if you want to say something, maybe indicate this and then in the chat. And then my colleague Wolfgang will, make sure that you can speak and indicate this to me as well. So yeah, Wolfgang, do you want to say hi as well?
I just want to say that's me. I'm Wolfgang. I'm here watching the chat and the questions you have, and I will make sure that everyone's being read or heard. So have a nice webinar. Yeah. And maybe if you are not speaking, then mute yourself, because otherwise we might hear a lot of feedback. But I'm also going to mute you if I see there's a lot of noise coming from your microphone. Without further ado, I would like to ask Anja from our lead partner Isavot to say a few words about the project.
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me well. Welcome and thank you for joining us on our first Social Siesta Webinar session. We wanted to start this year a little bit more relaxed with a positive attitude. So we have these 3 webinars that we will be hosting. Another one also in January and in the beginning of February. As Carsten said, we are implementing Central Europe project, which is called CE Responsible. We are 11 different institutions, organizations coming from 9 countries in Central Europe regions. And what we are doing, as you know, there are many European projects and initiatives that deal with the topic of social innovation and social entrepreneurship in Europe. In our project, we are especially focusing on supporting NGOs and social entrepreneurs on one side, and we try to establish cooperation of this group with for-profit companies, also with bigger companies. So this is our main focus. And what we are doing, we are researching and analyzing the existing environmental support and identifying what is missing, what can be improved. We are also having a lot of capacity building events like this, exchanging knowledge, information, experience about how the systems of support work. What are the stories of social entrepreneurship, how they differ in what they are doing on the daily business. And in the last half year, we also selected 90 innovative social ideas, which we support. And let's say we're trying to network them with other entrepreneurs so that these ideas would become projects, services, new products. So this is basically what we are trying to do in the framework of the project. And yes, I hope that we will have interesting and lively debate today, how we can improve the work of social economy and social entrepreneurship in our regions. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, Anja. That's fantastic. So I wanted to mention, because I would like you to get to know each other as well. So please use the chat to, write where you are based, what your name is, what is your social entrepreneur, or what organizations do you work for? And if you want, you can also put your LinkedIn profile into the chat so that we can network with each other. And also, I mean, if you want, you can, of course, provide us some info about what you're looking for. So, for instance, if you are a social entrepreneur and you are looking for partners in other countries, then more than happy you can put this into the chat. Or if you want to find out certain questions today, then please put this into the chat. But you're also just welcome to simply write your name and what you do and your LinkedIn profile or any other website that you want to put into the chat. So thanks so much. And so I'm going to be introducing the speakers now. I'm really happy that we have a very international set of speakers today. You have probably seen them already on the registration page, but I'm going to briefly introduce them as well. First of all, we have David Kovalsky. David is a distinguished entrepreneur, a mentor to startups and social entrepreneurs as well. So we were talking with David about that side of supporting social entrepreneurs. So David, very much welcome. Then we have Theodor Petričević, who can I also say is a serial social entrepreneur with Akupa. He has a lot of experiences in setting up social entrepreneur organizations, also in a big team. I'm very impressed, Theodor, the team you have assembled over the last couple of years. We'll talk about that as well. But thanks for joining us today. And then we have Živa Lopatič, I hope I say it right, Živa Lopatič from Slovenia. She's one of the first social entrepreneurs in Slovenia. She has worked especially in the area of fair trade and sustainable development as well, but she also has a banking background. Oops, I'm going to apologize for this. So Živa has a background also in banking, and so she knows these two sides as well. So we will be talking about the challenges for social entrepreneurs in Slovenia especially, but also how these challenges can be overcome. So welcome, Živa. And then last but not least, I have Manuel Kreitmeir. Manuel is from Mannheim in Germany. He's been one of the first founders of the Baden-Württemberg Network for Social Entrepreneurs, and he has been working with a lot of large companies in Germany. And he will tell us a little bit more about how he has allowed large corporates to create a sort of like an incubator which can boost and grow social entrepreneurs and interact with them. So Manuel, thank you for coming in. So yeah, let's start with you, David. As I said, you are working for a long time in supporting companies. You're working as a growth and business development mentor. You have created the company Integrators, which as far as I understood, helps building the right teams for startups as well. So let us know a little bit more about you. And also, David, I would like you to know is when the large corporates, the large businesses, the more traditional businesses, the traditional investors, when they look at social entrepreneurship, how do they perceive social entrepreneurs right now? What is their image of social entrepreneurs?
Thank you for the kind welcome. Hi everyone. So a little bit of my background. I'm an ex-IT guy. I was like your prototype of IT guy in the early beginning of the 21st century. Beard, glasses, smoking a lot. Sitting in the basement, dark. Antisocial. Everything like your prototype. If you've seen the IT crowd, that was like the light version of me. And eventually I jumped from corporation and from an IT role and / management to classic entrepreneurship. We've been building a fintech solution, and basically with a nice impact of democratizing information about finances, personal finances, which eventually I've sold my shares in 2016. And I've made like every mistake that an entrepreneur could make. I'm very stubborn, and IT guy, antisocial. So when anyone told me to do something, I did just exactly the opposite, which led to fantastic losses, which eventually played out well, but just by a small margin. So when I sold my shares, I was sitting in Impact Hub, drinking coffee and looking into the distance. You could easily mistake me for the boss because I was constantly, staring at the distance and, not, thinking about the next big thing. When someone tapped on my shoulder and said, "Hey, David, can you help us with a couple of NGOs and, and social businesses?" And before I wanted to say and before I said anything, the person continues like, "Yeah, it's just karma only, there's no money there, it's you have to cover your expenses and it's going to be okay because you already made the money, right? You don't need the money and that's going to be fine." So I'm thinking to myself, like the guilt game, right? So I feel the guilt and say, well, this is like truly bad. How do you expect something to have quality if the first thing you hear is there's no any money, you cover your expenses and the guilt game, right? You have the money, so you're bound to support. So obviously I said, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I played the guilt game, but I noticed that there's a lot of value to be made and to be built in not playing the guilt game, actually finding what the people are passionate about, what do they want from the products, what do they want from the cooperation, and playing on that side instead of selling something that you are bound to support it because you have money, the guilt game. So that's how I got into the area. And to answer your question about the companies, the corporate, I think the biggest issue that companies today are facing is obviously on one side PR, right? Many do CSR and social entrepreneurship just as a matter of PR, but the good ones and the smart ones see that as an innovation. They see it as a potential to bring people who have innovation expertise, who can bring something new, who do have the passion. Because eventually, if you work in the corporate for too long, it's very little about product discovery. In the corporate, the very typical workflow is, the problem, the solution, you have the resources, and it's about the process, right? Mm. As in entrepreneurship in the beginning, and especially in the social entrepreneurship, you have a pretty good definition of the problem, what you're facing, but the rest is unknown, right? What's the solution, and how do I get to supposable solution without resources? Mm-hmm. That's a lot of value the corporations and the big companies can buy, and that's what they might be looking for. Yeah, and David, just to follow up on this, I mean, so what are then? So when large companies, when they look at social entrepreneurs, what are the questions they should be asking, and what are they asking to social entrepreneurs about their businesses? Because what I sense is that a lot of social entrepreneurs, as you said, they have a really clear understanding about what the problem is in a society, and they have an innovative way of asking them, but sometimes they find it difficult to interact with large corporates, large investors, etc. Maybe you can highlight this, like what they are looking for. It's a fantastic question, and thank you for that. It's actually one of the things that where the understanding of the NGOs, social entrepreneurship, and big companies, where a common understanding, a common language needs to be built. Because usually as an investor, like a typical investor or big companies, what you're asking for is the impact. You're asking for the outcome, what the outcome is going to be. But the whole principle of innovation is that you don't know. Right? You have like a rough path. You want to go, you want to test things. And eventually in some time, you come up and you either have a teleport or you have nothing, right? Or you come up to something else. So the question that comes down to people who are innovative, who are very high in product discovery skills, in looking for the new solutions, is what can you actually deliver? What can we actually check? What can we monitor? What can we market? What can we put into our marketing? What can we do with that? And it's a trick question. The entrepreneurs really should be selling that it's about the process, it's about the innovation, it's about the culture, and the effects that it will bring are somewhere, long in the distance. It's not going to be something that's going to be visible in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
If it were that simple, then one could implant something like company culture or skill set like innovation. Then the big companies who have lots of money would already have that, and they don't.
Okay, thanks so much, David. That's really helpful. Well, let's switch now to the perspective of Theo. Theo, you have been, as I said, like a serial social entrepreneur. Agrupa is a social enterprise which started 14 years ago. You wrote on LinkedIn that you have last year a revenue of 20 million Croatian kuna. You have 86 people working for you and supporting you. And if I'm not mistaken, you wrote you have currently 5 companies running within the group, which are all social businesses. So it's from my point of view, if I'm not being wrong here, but it looks like it's a very successful social business that you are running with Agrupa. So maybe, Theo, can you explain a little bit more? Number one is how did you get that far, but also, of course, how did you make yourself attractive in what you want to achieve for society for the companies that you collaborate with?
Okay, hi everybody. Well, if I will start from the beginning, as well as my previous colleague, I would say that like 25 years ago, I started as a punk activist. I started with the independent publishing house, publishing newsletters, different recordings, doing small and large festivals, etc., etc. And somehow that punk activism transformed to community non-profit work. So in 2003, I established the local community non-profit organization, which was mainly dedicated to solve the problems with the youth and the cultural independent spaces in the region. But something like 3 or 4 years ago, after the establishment, I think it was in 2007, we established the first social enterprise. So at that time, from 2007 to 2014, we established something like 7 or 8 social enterprises in the local community, and somehow we were recognized by different stakeholders as a venture building organization. And that period of our growth was really significant to us because we have learned a lot. We established different social enterprises in different sectors with different stakeholders and different marginalized groups. And somehow, I think it was again in 2013 or 2014, we established the first consortium of social enterprises in Croatia, but basically in Western Balkan region. Just with the goal to experiment how basically the collaboration networking works on a smaller or larger scale between the social enterprises and all other stakeholders. Today, ACT Group is ecosystem building organization, but at the same time also the social business support organization. We have different programs through which we are encouraging different social entrepreneurs to start the business or to grow the business. Today we have 52 social enterprises in portfolio. Among them, 5 of them are still the social enterprises we established like couple of years ago. So I would say that somehow last 4 or 5 years we were recognized by different stakeholder groups. First of all, by policymakers, of course, because if you're working in non-developed and non-enabling environment, then among the business development, you should also develop the legislation and policy framework and basically do the capacity building of the institutional players. But at the same time, we were recognized by the corporates. So somehow in the framework of their CSR strategies. So we started 5 years ago collaborating with the first corporation. We started with the joint support program for social entrepreneurs in Croatia. As I said, today we have 5 of them that are running for a couple of years. Each time we are onboarding, each year we are onboarding between 12 and 15 social enterprises, and we are giving them non-financial support 3 to 6 months and also financial support. Like 3 years ago, we connected also with the financial players from different commercial banks, but also with the impact investors. So we also established the Impact Foundation in order to develop the financial instruments for social enterprises in Croatia. And today we are managing also the platform of impact investors in Croatia. So to answer your first question, ACT Group basically maybe had the luck to be the first one that strategically dealt with the ecosystem development, but at the same time we had really strong focus on the gaps that exist in the ecosystem of social entrepreneurship in Croatia, and we introduced a lot of different mechanisms to support the development of the social enterprises. And somehow, you know, the policymakers, non-financial, financial investors just came to us, and we started to collaborate on development of different joint programs that are still existing today. Our impact is quite big. I would say we are doing impact measuring and impact reports every year. We are really well positioned in the ecosystem, and regarding the numbers, of course, you said we have 86 workers in 5 social enterprises that were initiated by us, but altogether the numbers are really big. So if you look that in Croatia there is 75 social enterprises existing, and 52 are in our portfolio. Basically, we are covering almost all social enterprises and helping them in their development path.
And Theo, maybe just a question. So you talked about that you measure impact, and David had also this point about the fact that the impact needs to be really clear, but at the same time, like many social businesses, when they start off, then there may be still an experimenting phase. So when you are supporting these social businesses, how early do you force them to start measuring their social impact, or do you
from the beginning? From the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, from the business modeling and testing and validating the business ideas. And then we are continuously doing the metrics on impact using different methodologies. This is something that we are doing also with the partners from the corporate sector. We are somehow impactizing their CSR strategies in order to somehow maximize their impact with the resources involved in the activities we are doing jointly.
Thanks. Okay, that's very interesting. Well, let's thank you very much. This is really a perfect bridge to Živa, because Živa, with Zadruga Buna, which is a cooperative focused on coffee and education and developing new business models. It's you also almost like an incubator for these fair trade companies, and you've been there very early on. So I want to ask you, maybe you can say a little bit more about what Buna does and how you sort of make sure that you grow your business, but also that would be interesting to know how early you started to measure and also communicate the impact you are having right now. So Živa, please go ahead and explain a little bit more about what you do.
Hello to everybody from Slovenia. It's been very interesting listening to both of the speakers before me, because we do it quite differently, since we are a much smaller player in Slovenia than my the previous speakers. Yeah, exactly. I will start with my story as well, because it's important to understand how we do things now. I started as a representative of fair trade in Slovenia. I still am. So I'm sitting on 2 chairs most of the time. One is the fair trade and the other one is cooperative Buna. But as representing fair trade in Slovenia, we started with lectures about fair trade, how the system works, and we represented the system through coffee, because coffee is something we all drink, we all use it every day, and this is one of the things we know nothing about usually. People don't know where it comes from, when it comes from, how it is made, what processes need to be done from the plant to your cup. So this was one of our ways how to approach people and start explaining things. And since we were talking about it for 2 years, so then we said, okay, let's not just talk about it, let's start a business model. And do it differently. So take everyday thing which everybody uses and make it socially responsible, but not just socially, also environmentally responsible. We set up 4 criteria for the cooperative and started doing things differently. And we are still doing them according to the 4 criteria we set up at the beginning. So if you ask us about our impact, we don't measure it in the sense that we say that many people, that many coffee cups or whatever, but we measure it in the sense that we are still following the criteria from the beginning. And through that, actually, we are raising awareness. So people who normally drink coffee just come to us, they like the product, and they start supporting the processes that we like to support as well. And of course, we are communicating that, because me and the other member of the cooperative, also the founder, we speak a lot, so people just can't come and just have a coffee. They also need to hear not all about us, but also about other things that are happening in our local community or in the global community. And we're communicating the fair trade, we're communicating the sustainability, the social entrepreneurship, social economy in general. We are part of the building the kind of the ecosystem in Slovenia, although there isn't any relevant ecosystem here, neither in local communities or in the country, although we have some mechanisms that could support this. So I'm happy to hear that our neighbor in Croatia has this much better developed than us. But we were recognized as a good innovation or as a good example by other partners from international community of social economy as well. So we are just doing what we like to do, which is drink good coffee and talk about all the stuff that are good and all the stuff that are wrong about the processes or with the coffee or other products that are on our markets.
You know, Živa, this is really interesting, and I wanted to ask you, since you've been one of the first ones who has promoting the idea of fair trade and, you know, doing the education about this, when you were approaching large institutions, policymakers, business support organizations, or large companies as well, what was your experience there? I mean, what kind of interactions did you have, and how easy was it to get into the room with them to talk about what you want to achieve?
With Buna, it's a little bit different, but with fair trade, it started in Slovenia. The first fair trade and the only fair trade store opened in 2004. And at that point, it got quite a huge support from the municipality. But then the support from the institutions actually ended in that sense. I mean, the municipality of Ljubljana is still supporting fair trade, so we have at least one big supporter, but to promote the products itself and usage of the products, we never had any big support from that side. But from the awareness point of view, there's a lot of support from schools mostly. So we do a lot of lectures about fair trade, about all the topics that are important now. And we are actually opening up, I mean, talking about more stuff than we used to in the beginning. At the beginning, we were explaining the system, and today we are talking also about structural change, about things that are happening on the EU level, that are happening in other countries and are good to be presented here as well. But also people today take this information in differently than they did 10 or 18 years ago when fair trade was brought to Slovenia. But from the Buna perspective, it's a little bit different since our main product is, of course, coffee. Our obstacle is that we are also very aware of the impact of coffee on the environment. So one of the things that one of our criteria was not to hurt the environment where we are selling coffee. So our coffee is not packed in bags, in coffee bags, because they would need to be professional coffee bags, which are very bad for the environment. So whoever cooperates with us, also from the big ones, they need to get our coffee in their own containers or in our container, which is then exchanged with them. Mostly we don't have problems, but they need to decide to do it. So they need to understand the story, and when they get behind us, it's not really a big problem anymore. But they need to change their way of thinking. And
the way of drinking coffee as well, then, right? Because they cannot, or not drinking, but like buying the coffee then from you, because it's a different.
Yeah, this is one of the obstacles they need to go past. The other is that they really need to know coffee, because the preparation of coffee, because we want everybody who drinks coffee that comes from our cooperative. We don't call it Buna coffee because we have different varieties of coffees, but we want to, when we talk about coffee, we want to talk about single varieties. So we don't name them by some brand names or whatever. And they need to know which coffee they are selling to their customers and how this coffee is supposed to taste in the cup or in that week. So they really need to learn a lot, which is also a good thing. They go through, my colleague usually does that. He teaches them how to use the equipment, how to use our coffee, and also where the coffee comes from, how it was produced, why it's a good way to produce coffee in this way, and so on. So the education, the training lasts from 3 to 4 hours at least, and not just once. It repeats itself then. So that, because these are not things that we can communicate easily with jumbos or through normal media. This is the things that we need to talk about. People need to understand stuff and start asking questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Živa. That's really interesting. That's also an ideal bridge to Manuel, because I would like to to bring in Manuel now, because Manuel, as I mentioned, you've been very influential in creating an ecosystem in Baden-Württemberg, which is one of the German federal states, since I think even before 2017. You've been very important for the European Social Economy Summit, which took place last year in Mannheim, which was, I think, a great event for social entrepreneurs. But also, Manuel, you have been working closely with one of the large German enterprises, SAP, in connecting them with social innovators. So maybe, Manuel, you can tell us a little bit more about how you did that. And also, again, to the original question, what are these large corporates when they are approaching social enterprises? What do they ask the social enterprise? What are they looking for? Manuel, please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Carsten. I hope you can hear me. I had a little bit trouble with the internet before, as it sometimes happens. So thank you very much for having me here. I think it's a perfect bridge from the speakers that were here before and the very interesting insights that you gave, especially Živa from you, because maybe a little bit about my original story. I'm a social entrepreneur myself. And actually, the background that I have is that my family owns a tea farm in Sri Lanka. My family migrated to Sri Lanka more than 22 years ago. And I went back to Germany to study here. And during my studies, I founded my first social enterprise, which is still existing. And we connect tea and now also coffee farmers directly from the producers to big companies that can, through this contribute to their CSR and promote direct trade and social impact at the farms. So my background is actually growing up as a farmer. And even though my work shifted a little bit from that more into the ecosystem building, Carsten, what you said, it's still my roots, and my heart is very, very close to all these challenges that farmers face, and we're always happy to support. So maybe also there's a connection where we can help in the German market. Regarding what you said, so basically it was a very organic development for us. So I founded my social enterprise as a direct trade social enterprise, and a topic that I'm connected in direct trade from tea farmers in Sri Lanka to Germany as a student. And I was very, very lucky because one of the first supports that I got was from SAP. So for those of you who know in the social space, I think SAP is very well known because they do a lot of support in the social space. It's a big software company. Here in Germany, it's in our region. I studied in Heidelberg, Mannheim region, and this is also where SAP is based. So I was very lucky to go through a 6-month accelerator program myself as a recipient. And at that time, I was together with more than 20 other social entrepreneurs from all over Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And at that time, this was 2016, this topic was also not that big in Germany. And it was actually for me, kind of coming from the province here, like a medium-sized city, the first time I met other social entrepreneurs. At the time, we had a startup scene in Germany, but we didn't really have a social entrepreneurship scene outside of Berlin, maybe. As the capital, of course, they're always a bit front runners to that, but here definitely not. And what I experienced is that even though my colleagues had very different topics, a lot of them worked in integration of refugees, which was of course a huge topic in 2016, and others were working in doing an app for health or for mindfulness. But even though we had very different industries that we worked, we saw that there's something that connects us all, which is social impact, trying to do business differently, the whole big topic of impact measurement so that we can profit from one another, being connected, exchanging. And this was also the idea of starting Social Entrepreneurship Baden-Württemberg, which is just the state where we are, as a kind of peer-to-peer learning network for social entrepreneurs. Because what we realized doing this accelerator program and also applying, of course, as a social entrepreneur and doing all the mistakes an entrepreneur does in the beginning, trying to be too perfect, investing too much money in the product before testing it on the market. I saw that a lot of these programs are not designed by social entrepreneurs themselves. So there's, for example, huge obstacle sometimes joining them. Also, maybe the amount of time that is required to be part of such a corporate program is very, very difficult. And I think, as we all know, one of the biggest constraints social entrepreneurs have is time and money. And many of these programs don't really help with time and money. They, of course, help with input, but sometimes you cannot use that. And I saw this like from the own program, which I personally benefited a lot. But we thought, well, probably we could do something better if we involve social entrepreneurs in the design of these projects. And, we did this kind of bottom-up network here. And we asked big companies, like the first company naturally was, again, SAP, as they were very close by, and I went through the accelerator. And they were very open. And, the next year, and starting in 2017, we already did programs with them. So we co-designed programs with them, incubators, accelerators, where we brought together corporate experts and social entrepreneurs and involved social entrepreneurs in the whole design of the project and really try to address their needs more specifically.
And what did you change then? Because that's interesting. You mentioned that sometimes these incubator programs, they don't really fit the needs of social entrepreneurs. So what did you change so that the corporate was better, established to work with them?
So I think one of the first learnings that we had is really taking the time to understand the goals and the needs from each party. Okay. So what we do now basically is, working in the interface between different actors, maybe corporates, government, academia, and in this case, bringing together corporates and social entrepreneurs. I think it's always underestimated the amount of kind of, collective impact, a backbone organization, trying to understand what the corporate needs. We have heard before, corporate, of course, they do it often as part of their CSR strategy, sustainability strategy, which is also connected to PR, which I think is perfectly fine. It's one of the things, of course, they want to have as an output, but it should be clear and understood what the output is that they want to reach in terms of PR. It should be also understood that it has to create an inherent value for the social entrepreneurs. So what we do is that we invest much more time in kind of doing this backbone organizing, talking with partners. And you have mentioned last year we did a big European-wide accelerator with Volkswagen, Audi, SAP, and Microsoft. So even bringing like 4 corporates together, which all don't have the same goals. They don't have the same impact KPIs. They don't have the same strategy. Even if we talk about social impact, even in the corporate world, it's something very, very different for SAP than, for example, for Volkswagen. So it's a value for them to come together and kind of peer learning on their side. But of course, for us, if they do a volunteering program, not everybody by itself, but maybe, bundling their competencies, we can have a much bigger impact. And on the other side, just realizing that, of course, corporate is giving something, they're giving their money, the employees are giving their time, but also respecting the time from the social entrepreneurs. So what we offer is has to be really tailored to the social entrepreneurs that they can quite easily, for example, join. One of the things, we did hybrid programs even before COVID, which really helped us during the time of COVID to reach our stakeholders, like, for example, do it digitally and don't, force everybody to come to a certain place, or do it hybrid, right? Should be great. They meet each other, they come to one location, but then also make it easy for them to join. Really always look that they don't need to have so much investment and they get really something out of the program, and try to tailor it quite fast and match it with volunteers for their specific target groups. If they IT knowledge, you should have somebody from the IT background and so on and so forth.
Maybe I mean, because I know David has to leave unfortunately soon, and want to make sure I get your questions. I want to ask one question to all of you, like from the perspective of a social entrepreneurship, and we start with David, because David, I know, has a tight time budget as well. If in social entrepreneurs, if they see they need large partners, should they focus on, for instance, when they're approaching a large company, should they focus there on the CSR department? Should they focus on the PR department? Should they focus on human resources? Should they focus on the innovation department? I mean, where if you have a great idea as a social entrepreneur and you want to, establish this connection, where do you start? You can't start everywhere at the same time. So maybe David, can you give what would you recommend in this case?
Well, it's definitely doing your research first. So looking at what the company did in the past. Social media is always a good guidance on who's been the driver from the company, because it can really vary. Some companies, they have a massive PR campaign, and for me, there's also a question if I do want to be part of the PR campaign, because obviously if that's the outcome, it may not be really beneficiary for me to be associated with that type of company or a single type of company. So definitely looking at the way they do it is one thing. And oftentimes the social innovation comes bottom up. So when for example, I've been in Red Hat, and many of the activities that we've done, such as team buildings, have had a social impact eventually, and they've been like distributed from the lowest levels of the lowest guys who said, well, perhaps guys, we don't spend the team building on alcohol and food and hamburgers, but we can play with Lego, we can build out something, and then we hand it over. Maybe we do it. We can then send it to children's hospital, or we can buy goats for Africa, and so also reaching out to the teams, to the team leaders might be also a viable option. And again, the company has been very grateful, and I appreciate this almost a decade later in giving us the flexibility to do much of what we wanted to do, just without having any company's word in it. You know, there was no company PR campaign or anything behind it. It was just the good you do when nobody's looking.
Thanks, David. That's really insightful. Theodore, what's your point of view on this? You know, where should the social enterprises start?
Well, I think David explained quite good what is the approach. Our experience is basically networking, mingling in different social events, but the main points of entry for us were CSR departments and communication departments. Basically, if you want to have bigger impact, then you should start with the CSR department, because, as I said at the beginning, our approach is to somehow impact their CSR strategy and see how basically together we can maximize their impact with their resources. But if we just want to have a more visible program or some of the campaigns, then the communication department is the first start. And usually the people that are working in those departments are quite open, and they somehow also understand, because they're, you know, somehow working with the CSR as a topic for a long time, and it is somehow natural for them to approach to social enterprises and also to support organizations, start working together on some projects. So these 2 points.
Okay, thanks, Theo. Ziva, is that what you do when you approach them with Buna, that you look at the CSR strategy of the companies and then, no? Okay.
Actually, I don't have a lot to say on this topic, because we don't approach companies approach us. We are still such a small cooperative that we are not into that, but mostly we are working with purchasing departments. So I would say that depending on what you're offering or what your service or product is, because with us it's actually the quality of the product that sells, not the other stuff. So with the other stuff we do because we believe that they're good to be done, and when they hear it, they're happy to hear it. But it's not something they're not buying that; they're buying the product.
But that's actually, I mean, that's I wanted to focus on this, and maybe Manuel, you can also chime in on this. So if a social enterprise has to, you know, if they have to prioritize their resources and have to say, do I put the value which I provide to society first, you know, how I contribute to the accomplishing the SDGs, etc., or do I focus on the quality of the product, the services which I can provide for for my partners, etc.? Where do I start? Do I start macro level or micro level? Manuel, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I think also the other speakers have a interesting insight on that. Doing, incubators and working with startups, it's always the question that we have. What we see, especially in the social entrepreneurship field, we have a lot of idealists coming in, people at best that are emotionally or personally connected or affected by the topic. So you have a tendency of having, macro perspective. Which in my opinion is not always helpful, because as an entrepreneur, you should have the micro perspective as a vision, as a theory of change. Absolutely, that's something that we start with, and also kind of a North Star for the strategy of your project. But then you have to kind of deal it down in terms of social business modeling, right? Like, how do you get your funds? Either it be through donations, third-party funding, or selling a product, or we have a lot of mixed business models here in the social entrepreneurship sector. So then you have to kind of bring it down, and that's always a big challenge for any entrepreneur. I think also was a big challenge for me. Start with something that is not perfect in the sense, of course, impact-wise, environmental-wise, you have to compromise. Živa, you said a very nice example with the product of your coffee, which is very difficult. I know, like, how do you pack your coffee? Do you go for quality, or do you go environmentally, having another packaging? So we would advise kind of having a macro perspective of a North Star, but then try to narrow it down, and perfect is the enemy of done. So start with something and continuously get better together with your partners, together with your customers.
Mm-hmm. Wolfgang, are there any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Exactly. There's a question from Larissa. If you want, Larissa, you can also open your mic and your camera. And if not, I can read out your question. So everyone is invited to show him or herself. Okay, then I will ask the question to the speakers. Is rather partnering up with large players or looking for government funding best? What's your experiences here?
Who should start, Wolfgang?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear well.
Rather partner up with large players or look for government funding. What are your experiences here? So maybe Theo, you can start.
Yeah. So our experiences, we finished the collaboration with the government, and so we are not using government resources for 6 years now. So everything is funded by private organizations or private investors. That was really important for us because the government and the collaboration with the government structure is too slow. Somehow, you know, when you start the project, design the project and introduce it to the government, it takes years before you get the funding. And somehow we decided to cut all the activities with the government when it's about the funding. Of course, we are doing a lot of the research and advocacy and policy activities, but without any funding from the government. So ACT Group and our social enterprises don't receive any euro from the government.
Okay.
My experience, apologies for the noise, is that the governments are very hard partners when it comes to understanding what you're actually trying to achieve. So the governments are very slow to pick up on the terminology, technology, money, and it takes a lot of energy to explain if you want to do something which is innovational. The governments are just not very good at that. So my experience is it's better suited for private.
Okay. Živa, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. It depends on tenders and calls which are also available. If they really follow or they're suited to your needs. Otherwise, you just start doing things what the tenders calls government wants from you, and you lose your initial idea or initial way, which happens a lot, especially in Slovenia. And I don't think this is a good thing to do. So you need to decide what you want.
Manuel, before you answer, maybe also consider the follow-up questions too, like how do you check if your core values or your mission fit the ones of your partner corporations? So maybe you can answer both questions then.
Yeah, absolutely. So I said both, and this is also what we do. So maybe I disagree a bit here. Our experience is anyway somewhat similar. I would say that if you work with governments, either we work with local governments, for example, here in Baden-Württemberg, also what Carsten already said, we do a lot of work for the European Commission. There's, of course, as part of the Social Economic Action Plan, European Green Deal, a lot of tenders and calls from Commission side. Generally, our experience is that you have to put much more investment in terms of time and energy to work with the government. But if you get the chance to get government funding, you can have a larger impact. It's mostly long-term funding. It's a little bit easier than in implementation in terms of strategy. When you work with corporates, it's absolutely more agile. You can definitely do it a little bit more according to your needs. So I would probably say that in the beginning, it makes sense to work with corporates, and that's what we did. We started with corporates who are maybe a little bit more innovative, faster. You can do projects there, but we have now mixed funding of both corporates and government, which personally I like very much, because you have at the one side also you can see what is happening on a corporate perspective, also what is happening on a government perspective, and we are not dependent from one or the other one, which I think also connects to the follow-up question. in terms of the core values that we have and the values our corporate partner have. I mean, there's probably two ways. One is, of course, the official mission statement. I think there's no big corporate anymore that doesn't have a purpose defined by itself. It's a little bit of a trend to have a higher purpose as a corporate. That doesn't necessarily always need to be in reality implemented. So there's always like a gap between what a corporate, of course, wants to achieve as a purpose and what their CSR goals are. But this is a good way to start. And I think, Theo, you said it before, looking at the goals and the topics that the corporate is actually working on and how does this connect to you. And then the other thing is probably talking to them and working with them and seeing how this is implemented in reality. And then at the end, you will find probably some long-term partnerships or some corporates that are closer to your mission and some who are not. And I think the big challenge here is then to decide if you see that there's a mission drift, out of some reason, to say also no to potential partnerships and funding, and be true to yourself and to your core value, which is not always easy, but I think absolutely necessary also to say it doesn't always work.
Thanks so much. That's almost a very good closing statement. Thanks, Manuel. Yeah, I mean, with that, actually, I was going to ask if there's any comments from the audience where you want to share your thought on this or ask a question. If not, then I would like to say thank you very much to the four speakers, to David, Theo, Živa, and to Manuel for joining us today. Thank you for all who came in. As we mentioned, as Anja mentioned, we will do 2 more of those. We will talk about the communication for social entrepreneurs in the next webinar, and then we will talk about what Manuel mentioned, the social economy strategy of the European Union in February. And we invite you very much to join us there as well. And with that being said, thank you so much for coming, and please network with each other. We have our website, Net for Social Impact, which we are putting more and more resources on. So the idea is that to connect to other organizations, etc. And so if we are missing anything there, then please let us know. And then I would like you to enjoy your afternoon and have a nice coffee or tea break. You drink sustainable drinks, coffees, and eat sustainable food, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you, everyone.